As you can probably guess by now, Foveon sensors demand really good glass. In fact, the development of the mirrorless sensor was a big reason why Sigma went from making lenses looked down upon like a janky second-player game controller to the producer of some of the sharpest glass in history. The Quattro sensor, being of higher resolution, is actually even more demanding, and is a driving force behind the creation of some of Sigma's best SLR lenses for APS-C size sensors. One of them we have here today, the 50-100 f1.8 ART. This particular copy is also a bit of a unicorn, being an SA mount. It can still be special ordered from Sigma if you want one new. So this is not going to be a comprehensive review of the 50-100, just a physical overview and showing some of its capabilities in a couple of areas with the camera that it was actually primarily designed for. This is the 50-100 f1.8 ART, a fast, high-quality portrait zoom designed to give APS-C users something close to what you would get with a good quality 70-200 f2.8 portrait zoom on full-frame cameras, with the added benefit of having much better light gathering performance, as it is still an f1.8. The image circle is also big enough to make it usable on APS-H cameras like the Quattro H and some Canons, and at least at 100mm it should be fine on full frame. I remember watching reviews for this lens and hearing reviewers complain about it being overkill for APS-C, that people interested in something like this would just move on to a full frame system, so what's the point? These reviewers were not accounting for the fact that this lens was designed first and foremost with the SD Quattro and the SD1 in mind, two cameras that easily outperform, image quality wise at least, any other APS-C camera on the market in the areas that they're good in. Slow stuff such as architecture, still life, art reproduction, and portraiture. What makes these complaints even more baffling is that this lens, which debuted in 2016, is still the sharpest and fastest zoom lens available specifically for crop sensors, and most likely that there ever will be available for crop sensor DSLRs. So of course it's going to be big and heavy. Being that even the SD1 is still very relevant even all these years later, the 50-100 is not a bad value for the Sigma shooter, or someone who has invested a lot in their APS-C system already. It is one half of what I think are the two essential lenses for the Foveon shooter that wants a sort of all-in-one minimalist package, the 18-35 f1.8 being one of them, and this 50-100 f1.8 being the other. These cover so much subject matter and are of such high quality. Someone that just wants a whole package and not have to worry about buying other stuff can just eat two and done. And on the secondhand market, they're not that expensive. Looking at the lens itself, it is very well built, at least, as well as the rest of the ART lineup. It's all metal and polycarbonate, and I think there's some carbon fiber in there somewhere. It was definitely made to take abuse. For an APS-C lens, it is quite heavy. Not quite full frame sport zoom heavy, but much more substantial than most any other lens that I have laying around. Despite this, taking out a 20+ mile walk didn't feel particularly burdensome. I mean, granted, I'm used to walking significant distances with even bigger lenses and a full backpack. It uses an 82mm screw-on filter on the front element. The hood easily slides over and locks in with the filter installed. If you're using a CPL or a variable ND filter, you won't be able to rotate it with the hood on though, which, it's kind of obvious. The manual focusing ring is very large and smooth to turn. Manual focusing this lens is very easy. It has a really long throw, so you can really dial it in. My particular copy is out of calibration, so I can't really rely on the autofocus. I could take the time to calibrate it, but I'm so used to focusing manually, I haven't really bothered. For autofocus modes, you only have on and off. The lens does not have any form of OS. Putting OS into a lens like this would make it much bigger than it already is, and honestly, for its expected use cases, it's really not needed. As with practically any other lens of this caliber, it has a really nice focusing scale. There is a slight difference in infinity focusing point between 50 and 100. I found the scale to be helpful in quickly determining after zooming in or out if it was going to be in focus or not before looking back into the viewfinder. Behind that you have the zoom ring, which also as expected is buttery smooth. This is actually an area where I experienced a problem. Under the zoom ring is a tripod foot, where extra screws are stored for repairs. One of the screws worked its way out over time, causing it to scrape up against the zoom ring, damaging it slightly. I managed to get the screw out by rubbing a business card against it in the field. I'm sure this is covered under warranty. Under that is the rotating tripod collar. It does not come off, but the foot is small and it has detents on all 4 90-degree increments. When you hit a detent, it gives a nice click. Behind that is the mount, which is obviously going to be metal. All in all, as expected of an $1,100 to $1,200 new APS-C zoom lens designed to hold up against Foveon sensors, it leads the kind of quality expected of the alt series. In the field, it handles as you'd expect. It's a long tube with some twisty parts. It is easy to differentiate the focusing in the zoom rings by feel due to the size difference, and I found that manually focusing was really easy with Quattro's excellent focus peaking. I set mine to red to make it really obvious. One thing I will say that I do regret is not taking the battery grip with me on my first trip out with this lens. Despite adding weight, the handling benefit is huge, and it makes shooting in portrait orientation much easier and more stable, especially when there's nothing to brace myself on. The small sandbag I brought was useful in lieu of a tripod. I was able to squish it around and get the angles I wanted. These sandbags are full of some kind of lightweight shredded hard foam, so they don't really add much weight to the pack, and mine is pretty small, but it's enough to support the lens. Zooming from 50 to 100 doesn't seem like that much range, but in practice, with the kind of subject matter that I was dealing with the day I took it out, it really is. At 50 millimeters, I was able to get whole buildings or larger portions in the frame, while 100 millimeters, I could really pick out more interesting details or just focus on the top. It wasn't as much of a difference as between, say, like 18 and 35 millimeters, but it was very significant. So how were the overall results of the day? Absolutely stunning. I primarily shot it at f1.8 to make sure that I was maximizing depth of field without diffraction. Research actually shows that the sharpness peaks at about f4. The amount of detail in these images, though, is pretty otherworldly. Processing images in black and white allows one to further extract even more detail and lend to the characteristic three-dimensional appearance Foveon sensors are known for. It really does the beautiful masonry work of older buildings justice, while showing the stark, clean lines of newer ones. In fact, there is so much detail that every bit of dirt and bird poop easily shows up. Looking through windows, you can clearly see tables, chairs, lighting, and other things. The lens is sharp enough to really help the sensor capture all the details. This makes me want to strap a CPL in the 60 to 600 and see what I can find. With ethics in mind, of course. I'm no peeping Tom. Color rendition of this lens is gorgeous too, as expected. I don't usually use color presets on my cameras, but I really like the look of the newer teal and orange color mode around golden hour. It really makes the Sentinel building here, a notable San Francisco landmark, stand out quite a bit against the more muted sky and the nice orange reflections on the more modern structures around it. Switching to a neutral scene with color on, color accuracy straight out of the camera is pretty good. The lens doesn't seem to create any artificial color cast as expected, something of this price bracket. On the second outing with the 50 to 100, I decided to hunt down something San Francisco is famous for, street art. This comes in the form of murals or large decals on the side of garbage containers or various other things. This is the closest thing I have ever seen to basically just taking the artwork and sticking it on a scanner. Some things, when cropped, don't even appear to be a photograph until you notice the dirt and grime. I did notice, though, that a polarizer would have helped a bit in some cases, such as here. Even though it was very overcast, the clear coat used on the paint is still pretty reflective. The resolution is good enough to where I can do some pretty extreme crops and still extract a lot of detail on very small objects, such as this bird. See those little white streaks and dots? That's drizzle, invisible to the eye. And these two hanging out on the roof are probably easily identified despite taking up such a small area of the frame. The 50 to 100 also seems to make a great tool for building inspectors. Rather than doing a brick wall test, I took a shot of this brick building. What I didn't realize was the amount of detail that one can make out inside the windows. What the hell kind of ceiling is that? Is that up to code? It looks like shag carpet. Man, this lens delivers. It would probably be lighter to find f1.8 primes covering 50 and 85 millimeters, but if MTF charts are to be believed, this outperforms popular options anyway. And 100 millimeters f1.8? That's bonkers. I don't feel a desire to upgrade to, say, the 85 f1.4 art at any point with this lens. It's just that good. And for someone that does things like I do, I highly recommend it as part of your Foveon kit. I actually plan to use this lens for art reproduction. It really does a street art justice, and I'd love to be involved with immortalizing it. I will have more images from the outing available in my Discord. I'll put them in my cloud storage so you can see all the delicious details, since I know YouTube compression is not going to do them justice, as it never does, even at 4K. So if you're interested in the kinds of things I talk about on my channel, come check it out in the link in the description. The community is growing. Everyone's showing off their cool finds, recent results, and helping each other out. So that's all for today. Like and subscribe for more Foveon specific and other weird camera content. If you saw all those old manual lenses on the table near the beginning of the video, that's a preview of what I'm probably going to be doing next. That or the 60 to 600 forward grip. Oof. Take care and have a good night.